Welcome to Good Morning Hospitality, your one-stop shop for the latest news, noteworthy trends, and thought-provoking discussions across the industry. From hotels and short-term rentals to all things travel and hospitality, you'll find each episode equips you with the information that you need to start your week. Join us on Good Morning Hospitality every Monday, wherever you get your podcasts.
Before Sojo, the space it took to keep products on hand for as many houses as we have was crazy. Sojo eliminates that and allows us to utilize our space a whole lot better. I used to spend hours kitting amenities before we found Sojo. Having the right amenities for every reservation is crucial for the guest experience. Sojo has worked flawlessly so far. It has helped with the team tremendously because everything you need is all in one box. You just pick it up, drop it off, and assemble on site. These are real life testimonials from real life operators who are the decision makers within their company. All you have to do is really connect your calendar, choose your amenities that you want, and leave the rest to their automations. It's pretty simple, it's really easy, and it saves you a ton of time. So get with Sojo using the link in our show notes, or you can go to goodmorninghospitality.com/partners. Then of course, use our link, and we would love to make sure that you guys are taken care of with our friends at Sojo. So make sure you connect with them today. And of course, like always, we are back to the episode. Good morning.
Good morning.
Happy Monday.
Dang it. You're not even supposed to know that, Jamie.
Best day of the week.
Yeah,
I was going to give you an opening for that, Michael.
Yeah.
You know,
We left it open.
No, I'm just mad I can't say Happy Monday.
I'll keep saying good morning here for all the listeners. We'll get our own scripts down, and that way we'll never have this happen again.
Oh, see, I just kind of like frustrating Michael on Monday morning.
It used to be the best day of the week, everybody, but now
it's too good. Well, we're gonna have best day of the week. I don't know. Good morning, and then Jamie's new shirt, which is gonna be screaming for data. It's gonna be and Brandy rants. We can't forget a good old Brandy rant T-shirt.
Will,
So,
everybody's got a slogan but you.
when there's a will, there's a way, baby. That's all I gotta say.
Oh my God.
Anyways, good morning. Good to see you guys again. Welcome back, Jamie. We missed you. It feels like a month is a little too long. It felt like 3 months actually from Verma to today. So welcome back to your favorite podcast. I know this is your favorite out of all the shows that you do.
Oh, it's definitely my favorite Monday podcast.
Favorite Monday podcast.
Very diplomatic.
Yeah. You should run for office. Very politician of you.
Yeah, it has been a while. I've been traveling, spent 2 weeks in Spain, was out for the Vacation World Summit, Antonio's conference, which was unbelievable. So different than any other industry conference. Highly suggest if you haven't gone to it, you go in the future. It's going back to Porto next year. I'm already booking my flights out for Porto. I've never been there. I'm so excited.
It's beautiful. So
Yeah.
I think maybe next year we'll have to pencil that in.
Yep, GMH on the road going to Porto.
I
We
like
took
to
over
think
Barcelona.
I helped sway Antonio to doing it in Porto the first time around, and then I wasn't able to make it. So I'm gonna have to get out there the second time he's done it.
Definitely.
But yeah,
Yes.
I echo those. It's probably my favorite vacation rental conference out there.
Love that. And not speaking of conferences, but speaking of fun activities on the weekend, Brandy, how was your Friendsgiving? I saw you were cooking up a storm for like 2 days.
Yeah, I cooked for basically 2 days. I don't do like a potluck situation. I cook all the food. So I cooked, dinner for like 30 plus people.
Jeez.
And I planned everything really well. I only had one oven, which is like there's a lot of strategy involved. But it came out really well. I was just very tired. Like I didn't sit down for an entire day. So, but it went well. Lots of good food.
Don't trust other
Love
people's
that.
potlucks. That's the moral of
No,
the
I
story.
have like that's the thing is that people are like, oh, can I bring something? And it's like you send me money and you bring wine. But like if someone shows up with like a Publix pie, it just goes in the trash. Like that is not what we're doing here. So
Especially Publix.
especially Publix. Listen, I don't want to fight with people about Publix. I already get into enough arguments down here in Miami, but people who know me know my feelings on Publix.
Publix is
Yeah,
great.
my nieces. I was gonna say my nieces would hate that I just said that because they love Publix. I think it's like the best thing since sliced bread.
Mhm.
All right.
Anyways,
Well,
moving on.
Jamie's been clamoring to give us some data since our show, I believe last week, on guest favorites in Airbnb's new tag. Jamie, what is the most surprising piece of data that no one knows about guest favorites?
So, and one, I'll start with some overall facts, but then I'll get into surprising ones. So, 31% of listings in the US are guest favorites. So, it sort of and mirrors what we saw over and globally. So, there's like 7 million active listings on Airbnb. Brian said in the launch about 2 million of those are guest favorites. There's a lot of guest favorites out there.
Isn't I mean, that kind of seems kind of contrary to my thought of what guest favorites was supposed to be.
Mm-hmm.
It's a lot of properties. So I looked through all our scrapes and he said it was just about 2 million. We found about 1.6 million with the guest favorite tag. So a lot.
Rounded up.
Yeah. In the US, it's about 425,000 listings that are guest favorites. So a lot. But what I was expecting, because typically large property managers have lower overall review scores. And it's just harder to get and consistently good scores. And that's a big part of the reason why most large property managers aren't super hosts. But when we look at the percent between, let's say, people with one unit, so that on average, about 27% of listings are super hosts. And then large property managers, so more than 20 listings, it's still 26%. So large property managers are just as likely as, say, individual hosts, so those with just one listings, to get guest favorite status. The sort of group that is much more likely to get guest favorite status is those with 2 to 5 listings, and that it's 54% of listings where hosts have 2 to 5 listings have guest favorite status. So there's almost like a sweet spot in there of just a few listings that you can manage really well and get a large percentage of those as guest favorites.
Well, it seems like this is, actually a good opportunity for the larger players, because we're like, as you're saying, Superhost is kind of hard to achieve. So this is something that isn't on such a large, like there isn't such a large time frame. You don't have to wait very long. It's very dynamic, and it gives some of the bigger operators maybe a chance to stick out more with one of those fun badges if you don't have Superhost.
So I'm really thrown off that it's 30+% of properties are guest favorites. I mean, like I could go to 50 restaurants, but then I might only say 3 are my favorite. So like it feels like it should be in the single digits. So is this just a kind of a ploy? They're another marketing scheme, a brilliant marketing scheme by Airbnb. Add a bunch of listings, add a bunch of properties, but actually just like kick them down the bottom, and then let's have the ones that make us more money by giving them this moniker.
Yeah, I think it gets to, in the end, sort of the rate inflation and review score inflation that we see of like the average review score out there is 4.75. You've got guest favorites, you need to be 4.9 and above. That's a huge percent of listings are 4.9 and above.
So we talked about this last week. What's your take on, everywhere you feel obligated to tip now, but it also feels like online, everywhere you feel obligated to give a 5-star.
Oh yeah.
Like
and
you're
especially
a jerk if you don't, right?
And especially if it's someone that only has like 1 or 2 listings and you give them a bad score and you sort of really hurt their earning potential as a person. Like I feel less bad about maybe giving Brandy a below 5
Jamie!
score because that's the company. Like, but that's sort of the feeling people have. It's like it's much easier to give a company a low score than it is to
For
give
sure.
like Will if he's hosting a low score. And what else is Will gonna do?
Well, the thing is, like, it just, regardless of what size you are, to claw back from a 1 or 2 star review takes so many 5-star reviews. We've done the calculations, and I think it's like 19 5-star reviews for a 1 star. And I could correct my math, but like it's something really, really high.
That's half
And
the
so,
year. Yeah.
yeah, exactly. And so, yeah, it's hard. Those low scores are tough.
Not to mention one of them kicks you down, so now everyone else gets up higher, and the chances of you getting booked are lower.
Yep.
Exactly.
Well, let's also talk about like there's been a lot of people, especially that I've been seeing on social media, that get the guest favorite badge, but they're not a 4.9. So why create this badge if you're not going to stick to the standard of 4.9? So I feel like maybe there's some like not like some inaccuracy
There's probably
around
some
this
recency
whole.
bias.
Yeah,
Yeah.
definitely seeing some recency bias of like just because you got one star review like a year ago, and you're not getting your overall review score up, but you're getting a whole bunch of sort of recent 5-star reviews. I bet that's enough to trigger you back into guest favorites where your overall review score might be lower. So the other thing I thought would be fun is like the type of cities that have a high percent versus low percent. So there's some cities, or most large cities are really low percent, like Honolulu, New York, San Jose, Las Vegas. Less than 20% of the listings are guest favorites. And there's some areas like Asheville, North Carolina, St. George, Utah, Fayetteville, Arkansas. Over 45% of the listings are guest favorites. So my pop quiz for Brandy, where do you think Miami is? What percent of listings do you think are guest favorites?
I feel like it's in the 10 to 15%, like 15 being really liberal. So let's go with 10. Well,
22%.
oh wow. Okay. I'm pleasantly surprised. I mean, it makes more sense to me that people like those smaller towns, like you said, in Arkansas that have a higher percentage. I think it's more like I don't know, people who are doing their home. There's maybe more care going into it. But yeah, like always, there's just a lot of competition in Miami.
So one of the cool things for the industry, I think a lot of us have felt it over the past 6 months or this year. Stock prices have largely mirrored that, but over the last 30 days, we've seen Expedia's stock price jump by 40+%. Help us understand what's going on over there, Jamie. What happened?
So, one, international travel happened this summer. It was massive. I'd say what hasn't happened is some great performance for Vrbo. And still a large percent of Expedia's bookings come from their hotel supply, not necessarily a Vrbo supply. And we're seeing really and massive differences in performance. And we see it in the short-term rental stocks or short-term rental players too. So where Vacasa and revenue down and 8% year over year, Sonder revenue up 29% year over year. You've got an overall Vrbo revenue down and mid-single digits. You've got Airbnb revenue up 15%. Nights booked up 14%. Like you've got really dynamic changes within the market. And a big piece of this, you heard it in the hotel industry earnings calls, was just the real weakness across leisure markets and destination resort areas, just seeing really overall weak performance as international travel came back. We're looking at it in our data in terms of Americans and where they're going. So you've got year over year demand up about 7%, but domestic trips by Americans are only up about 4%, while the number of international trips were up over 16%. And when you look across Europe, performance has been doing really well. That's been playing to the overall performance for hotels from Expedia, is playing into Booking.com. They're seeing even stronger growth than Airbnb is, and also playing into Sonder's sort of strong growth. So they've got a lot of their supply is now hotel supply, a big presence in Europe now, and a big presence in being able to attract international guests coming into the US, given the type of markets that they're in.
Yeah, so a lot going on behind the scenes. Not a whole lot attributable to Vrbo specifically, or
no. Vrbo, we're actually seeing flat overall listing growth, where Airbnb is up 19%. So if you think about in this dynamic industry that we're at, if Airbnb is growing supply and revenue per available listings down, like Airbnb's growth is actually impacting Vrbo's sort of ability to continue to grow revenue.
Well, I would expect a bleed over, depending on the changes that Airbnb's making to create loyalty between that 1 in 5 user group. I would expect more supply on Airbnb means more supply on Vrbo 6 months from now or a year from now.
Maybe. And the total number of listings that we're seeing is still highest in terms of new listings is still highest on the 1 to, let's say, 20 host operators, but the fastest growth percentages is happening with the largest operators, and they're the ones growing supply fastest. And while we're still seeing growth on Vrbo in the US, up 2 or 3%, we're actually seeing listing growth or falling listings in Europe. So maybe they're not getting the traction that they would have hoped for. And they've said on their earnings calls, like they've gone through this massive transition on the back end, and they've sort of pulled back on some of the marketing, and they're getting people transitioned, especially now in Europe, over to the new site. And so I expect that this was maybe a pause in growth this summer as they transition over, and that I'm expecting pretty good things from Vrbo going forward, given they've got their new site, they've got their loyalty programs, and they can really lean in over the next 12 months.
We have a good question from Caleb about the type of accommodation growth in Airbnb. So do you have that distinguished? Like, is it more shared spaces, or is this standalone homes that we're seeing the most growth in?
Yeah, it's still standalone homes. Like, and Airbnb did their sort of relaunch of shared spaces, rooms. That has seen almost no impact on growth.
I was not surprised.
Yeah. Not surprised at all. I don't know. Even if you are like the nomadic type traveler, I don't see that being an attractive type of accommodation in my head. Like I want privacy. I want all the other stuff. So I don't know. It just doesn't seem like it was something that was going to take off in my head.
No, and it makes sense if they were able to make it work, because those listings are all essentially going to be exclusive to Airbnb. They're not cross-listing other platforms. So if they actually get people adding that supply again and staying in that supply, and it'd be great for the business. But we're still not seeing that really grow yet.
Yeah. So we had one other question from Jimmy, who worked at Airbnb for a long time. And I generally agree with this comment, but hosts needed a win, and introducing a new accolade, a new badge, a new banner creates that loyalty and excitement. And I don't think people have done the math to know that 31% of hosts also got it, but it's still cool and feels good when you have a new badge. And do you think they're going to trim that up, or do you think they're going to kind of keep it in that 25 to 33% range?
I don't know, Michael, we all grew up in this around the same time. Like, we were the generation where everyone gets a trophy, right? And I see that continuing. Like, Brian grew up there too. Everyone gets a trophy. You're all doing well. Like,
well, I would say the other side of that is that Airbnb, not everybody is getting a trophy, because they are suspending listings. They are really trying to cull the bottom portion of their listings, and that criteria spans, like many months. That's not just recent, kind of like it seemed like guest favorites is. You're the kind of the stick component of Airbnb encompasses many months, many reviews, all of that kind of thing. So I do, I mean, a lot of people are getting a trophy, but there's behind the scenes, they're also, suspending people. So that's, there's two sides to the coin.
So
Lovely.
Jamie,
Go ahead, Michael.
Will.
Nope.
All right, I got it. So Jamie, you've been on stage a lot over the past month or two. One of the questions that I'm curious on is some of the more near-term trends from all the major platforms, Booking included. I think we've stopped talking about Booking a whole lot in the industry in the US, but I know there's still a force in Europe. What are some of the trends that you see on occupancy rates and ADRs on Vrbo, Airbnb, and Booking?
Yeah, and is a great story for Europe this summer. And it's, I would say, like maybe year and a half behind the US in terms of recovery. And they're now on a trailing 12-month basis, fully recovered in terms of demand. ADR growth is looking really good, sort of mid-single digits. So they're able to absorb and the inflation of costs and they're still growing revenue per available listing. And supply growth is heating up though. So where the US is and supply growth is decelerating and it's still accelerating in Europe, which is putting some pressure in certain markets, certain countries in terms of can occupancies continue to grow and where we saw occupancies grow on the shoulder season in Europe. And that was anecdotally what I heard from every single property manager is that the summer's not ending. It's like, and we're coming into October and November and like, we're still booked solid. The streets are still packed. Like what is happening? And, and where
I heard that a lot too. It's like, we tried to go in the off season and it was October and it looked like the middle of August.
I think that's the trick is that everybody's like, oh, the trick is to go in the shoulder months. And then now you just have the shoulder months keep getting pushed, which is great for anyone who makes money off of it.
Yeah. And when you look at the data in Europe, it's like everything was always so concentrated to just July and August. Like if there was any ability to spread demand and longer and start the season earlier, spread it longer into the fall. And that's going to create an investability in short-term rentals in Europe that is so much greater than it was pre-pandemic. Because before it was just so much isolated, just those 2 months. They had to push rates really high during those months to sort of make it worth it. But I mean, if you can get a much longer season, that makes the whole investment thesis into European short-term rentals sort of change for the better.
Yeah. And I think that's, I mean, if you think about the traditional like European vacation timeframe, and it always has been so concentrated, but the world is changing. The way people work is changing. Not everybody is just going on vacation in August, except all of the French. So there's some more flexibility with your vacation time.
Yeah. So last week, my wife and I went to Granada and Sevilla in southern Spain. In Granada, it was cold. Like it was 50s during the day. It was 30s at night, and it was packed. Like and the Alhambra, we saw to get our tickets like months in advance. Like we could not believe how busy it was. Thinking November was going to be a slow month.
Yeah. Well, Will, this weekend or this past week, you kind of got to dive into more local politics and regulations at the Colorado Good Neighbor Summit. So kind of what were some of your takeaways from that?
Yeah, I'll say it's good to attend these. I like Colorado for the amount of localized events that we have here, which is really cool to see the community come together. Shout out to Dana Lubner and the Mile High hosts who all put this on together. It's 5th annual summit they've done, so it's been really good to see the growth there. I will say it was interesting because right out the gate, everyone it's a mix. Obviously, there's not as many big property managers. There's a lot of like primary home hosts who are, whether it's they're renting out the basement suite or they're doing some kind of mixed type of inventory there. But right out the gate, a Vrbo rep and an Airbnb rep were the first speakers together. and they jumped in on this new Colorado bill. I think it's called Bill C. So forgive me if I butcher anything on this, but basically the notes I took away from their slides in the conversation is that if you rent your home over 90 days, the primary home over 90 days, then your tax basically increases 400% from 6.7 to 27.9. And there's also some, Jamie, you'll love this part because it involves data and privacy and security, but they're trying to create a statewide database of these hosts and operators. And there's a lot of concern from both the platform side, but also the host and operator side of the security and privacy of that data and that information, kind of how it's being used and how public it's going to be and all this other stuff. So it was a pretty interesting conversation. And do got to say, like, I know sometimes we go down these, platform rants, whether it's a brandy rant or a different type of rant. But, to hear what these reps at Vrbo and Airbnb were doing, they were at the Capitol until like midnight the night before. They were there at 5 a.m. or 6 a.m. before the summit. And then right after their session, they went right back to the Capitol as there was a session currently in progress. So like, it's nice to see that they are really stepping in that way. And the information that they brought really helped, I think, the local community jump in and like actually want to be proactive on attending, these Capitol sessions that are open to the public and showing our voice. We did have a really good attendance. Dana shared about 40 people showed up in these t-shirts that were showcasing like their advocacy and their voice for short-term rentals, versus the opposing side was like 8 people, and they were all political figures and legislators and people that have no real impact, or at least no real impact in the real operations or community of short-term rentals. So we definitely showed up, which is nice, and I hope to participate in the next one as sessions kick off, I think right in the beginning of January next year.
Yeah,
sorry, that was a lot to throw at you guys, but there you
no,
go.
I think that's great. I think it's sometimes can feel a little intimidating or even futile to get involved in politics in general. But if these are kind of the ways that you can actually make a difference in your own business and your own community. So I think it's great that you're getting more involved with that. And for the sake of all of us that really love to go skiing in Colorado, I really hope that sensible laws are passed, because we need those big houses.
I was also going to say,
maybe-
not to make a controversial comment, but for all the Steve Milos out there, you don't just have to donate to advocacy to actually participate in advocacy. So you can show up and do other things that don't just involve funding to things that you don't know where the money's going. Just FYI. So go ahead, Michael.
Yeah. So not going to follow that one up, but I'm very fascinated from a macro level. Of course, if this is going on in your neighborhood, you feel it in a totally different way. But when a law passed in San Diego a number of years ago banning it, the average house price dropped in the city by like 20%. It was a crazy, crazy number. And then they quickly reversed that about 90 days later. So sometimes it takes a desperate measure for the local government to wake up.
Yeah.
I hope it doesn't have to come to that point, but sometimes that's kind of the step that has to happen for them to actually understand, because they're politicians. They don't know anything about hospitality. They just look at facts and figures that their lobbyists give them, and that says, this is bad. Make them stay in my Hilton hotel, not my short-term rental, right?
Exactly.
I'll donate to your campaign. Vote this way, right? That's how we all know politics works. But if they're going to get voted out because the average home price in their community is going to drop by 25%, they're not going to be in politics for very long. So they might actually wake up to it. So, and then it's very important the Jamie Lanes of the world provide the good, strong data for the industry. Data
is important. I know we were providing data to help the fight, and always happy to continue to do it, because in a lot of ways, and if they don't know the impact of the laws that they're enacting, and you've got to show it through data. Data, and also a big theme at the Vacation World Summit was around telling stories around the industry, and how stories really make the impact especially with politicians and not just data. So using data to maybe craft the story, but you've got to and bring a story to the fight because data is not going to do it alone.
Yeah, you have to
Yeah, that
engage
was
the emotions
okay.
and the empathy and like, convince people like why your story has legitimacy with the data, but then, convince them emotionally that they should change their minds.
Yeah, I was gonna say the cool thing, Jamie Sane on the Airbnb or not Airbnb, AirDNA team, got to give a presentation, and that really helped because data backing the story. And so I pulled some data from the show. One of our top, cities and states for the listeners of Good Morning Hospitality is Denver, Colorado. So if you are a host or an operator, Dana Lubner from Mile High Hosts, Rent Responsibly, all this stuff. They are doing a project that helps share the voice. So if you are a host, basically recording a video of what this tax increase would do to you and your business and the ability to build a legacy, whether it's through, building this like extra stream of income so you and your family can spend more time together or whatever it is. So there's a whole bunch of stuff that they'll have on the website there. And that's going to be my call to action for our listeners that are in Colorado. Let your voice be heard. We have a platform here, so I'm happy to also do more and participate in the local events in order to make sure that we get this this thing on the right side. So that's my big nugget of walk away from the weekend.
Wonderful. Well, great episode today as always. And before we head out for the rest of our week, we just want to thank our sponsors at TravelNet Solutions. If you're looking for marketing solutions or a new PMS, check out their link in our show notes.
Of course. And of course, happy holidays, you guys. Happy Thanksgiving.
Yeah.
Even though you got to celebrate a little early.
Yeah,
Brandy.
and since I'm not going to be on for another month, I'll shout out the two areas I'm speaking next. Dharm on Nashville. And then I'll be on the Book Direct Virtual Summit, Mark Simpson's sort of virtual conference at the end of November.
Love it. We'll put those links in the show notes as well. Michael, anything fun for you and the fam for Thanksgiving?
Just a lot of cooking, a lot of eating, hopefully. That's the plan. We'll see how it shakes out.
That's the way to do it. Awesome. Well, thank you to all of our listeners, to our live viewers, to Jimmy, to Caleb, to Terry White. You guys are amazing. Thanks for tuning in. We are excited to see you again next week. And if you haven't already, I've noticed we don't get a lot of reviews on Apple or Spotify, and there's a lot of listeners. So if you guys want to give us a review saying that you like the show, go to those platforms, whatever one you listen to, leave it a nice 5-star. And the first 10 people that do it, I'm going to pay for your coffee out of pocket, right from me. So 10 people, you're going to get free coffee if you do it. So send a screenshot, do an email.
And like we talked about early in the show, it has to be 5-star because
it
has to be 5.
Exactly.
If I see a 1-star come in, I'm taking you owe me a coffee and a beer. Just kidding. All right. Well, thank you guys for tuning in. Great to see your beautiful faces this morning, all three of you, and we'll see you all again next week.